Okay, so we got Tony Campbell. Tony is president now of GAW. So you've taken on that role, and
I have.
We're in three. Well, I know two other clubs together: GAW and AWG.
AWG, yep, in Barnesville probably. And
Yeah.
so,
And Tony has given classes. Tony has taken classes, and we appreciate him. And it was what, probably a 2-hour drive for you to come down here.
yeah, it felt like 2 hours, maybe an hour and 50 minutes, but yeah, it was a pretty good drive.
We do appreciate you coming down and doing this for us. I've seen this demo at GAW. I thought he done a fantastic job, and can't wait for y'all to see it. It's quite challenging, and I think the only reason he started doing this is you done the square bowl
Contest.
class with me.
That's
in my
true.
class,
Yep.
and he had to show me how to really do it. He impressed me with this. I'm telling you, this is quite a challenge. Steve's shaking his head, yeah. This is much more challenging than a plain old square bowl, and I was impressed when I seen it. And I am glad that you are doing that for us, because I think y'all are gonna learn something on this one. So I will shut up, and thank you very much.
All right, appreciate it.
The reason he's the president of the GW.
Yeah, if I could back up a little bit, I may not do the demo. All right, let's see if we can turn this on now. Is that all?
Yes.
All right, let's tuck this away. Well, it's great to be here. Good to see everybody. I think I know at least half of you, so that's good too. Yeah, this all got started a couple of years ago. I'm sure you probably know Hans. And Hans had a challenge at AWG to turn something square. So I think they gave us 3 months to do that. And what did I do? I waited till the weekend right before it was due. And then that weekend I went out on YouTube and I started looking for something to turn, something square. And I ran across the video from Ronald Kane in the Netherlands. And he did this, and it kind of intrigued me. So I thought, well, I'll turn one of those. So that particular weekend, I had turned this one here. Which camera? I turned this one and turned it in for the contest. I didn't win the contest, but everybody was kind of intrigued about this. So let's talk about this a little bit. When you turn these, some of the goals that you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure it's square. So you have to actually make this square. It's not something that you cut on a bandsaw or table saw or anything. You get to actually turn this square, and I'll show that. But you're looking for those 90-degree corners. You want to target an equal reveal on each of these so that you get your bowl right in the center. And then when you turn it over, really want to target that the bottom is square. And this one here, I'll pass this around. You can kind of see that the bottom's not square. So that's something I can show you kind of how to get that, but even that's still a little bit of a challenge, but we'll talk through that as I go through it. But that's how I got into this. Was that contest, and then later I decided to start doing some demoing. So about for the last year, I've demoed, this will be number 7 for this particular thing, and I did a couple of other demos. So I'm about a year into this. I'm about 4 years into turning. My experience has really been a lot of the hands-on training at AWG and a couple of classes at GAW. So that's my particular experience, just to give you a little bit of my background. But let me pass this one around so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm going to turn tonight. I have learned a lot by doing this. You turn something and you kind of get a little bit of experience, but I can tell you, you ought to start giving demos, because then you have to really focus in on it, spend a lot of time in it, and just go through a lot. So it'll increase your turning, or at least that's why I did this, was to kind of up my game a little bit, and it definitely has made a difference. Of course, I think I need to find something else to demo after doing 7 of these. But let's I'll kind of take you through a little bit more. As I was working up for this particular demo, I told Kim at our club what I was going to do, so he wanted me to incorporate something, and I'll kind of go more into this, but he wanted me to incorporate something. We had just had a demo from Emma Cook, and she turned a lot of stuff between centers. So he's like, well, can you do something to turn it more between centers? So I thought about it, and I did come up with a slight change there. But this particular thing, get overhead. This particular thing, I took and drew this up. So before I got started, after the first one, I decided, hey, I want to try to, make a plan for this. So I started drawing it up and I drew my circle here. And originally, or you've got the waste board in the center, and we'll talk about that quite a bit. The waste board, I'm calling this board here in the center because the waste board, because it's going to get wasted away. But I drew this up, and on paper, I thought, well, on paper, I says, why not take that center waste board and use it for multiple purposes? So on paper, I drew it up that I wanted to put tenons in here. So on paper, that looked really good. So I thought it'd be a good idea to use that waste board and do the tenons in the middle, but I can tell you what looked good on paper, it didn't look so good when I actually tried to cut those tenons. So I ended up moving the tenons to the outside, and I'll also show that tonight. But that's kind of how this got started. So sometimes if you do have a plan, draw it on paper, and then it may or may not turn out when you actually go to turn it. So, all right, so to get started with this, you can see that it's a block that I glue together. I talked about the waste board a little bit. Our target tonight is a 6-inch square bowl. So for that, it takes, I cut these blanks 3 inches by 6.5, 6.5, and then I glue all this together. Sorry, yeah, I glue all this together. The first few, I struggled gluing these together because you can imagine if you stack all of these up, I've got the waste board in there. I also go with paper, and you try to put clamps on this thing, and it starts slipping and sliding all over the place. So that, after I did 5 or 6 that way, it's like there has to be a better way. And I'm also going to do a class on this, so I needed to make up 8 of these for the class members. So I was watching somebody else's video out there on YouTube, and they had a jig that they had made up for gluing stuff. So I came up with this jig here, and this jig allows me to drop the boards in here. I can put the first one in, I can put my paper, I can put the waste board, and then with this setup, I can then clamp all of this up. And it's nice and easy. I mean, it's quick. In 4 or 5 minutes, I can clamp this up and the thing's not moving all over the place. I've also adjusted this jig so that I could do, this is the 6-inch. I also did it for a 5-inch and a 4.5. So of course I started making changes here, modifications, and I'll pass this around. I started making modifications so I could put a clamp across the side here. And that worked for the 5 and the 4. And then I went back to do a 6, and then my clamps don't have any place to go. So then I had to, put a temporary board over there. So as you make a prototype, or, I'd call this a prototype, but you kind of learn that one may not fit everything. So, but I'll pass this around. I didn't want to do a glue up here tonight or anything. But this kind of shows you what that would look like. That's got the clamps and everything. So that shows this jig here in action. You can pass this around if you like, but just a jig to make life easier there. We'll talk about it. I did, this turned into jig making. This is another jig I made, and I'll actually show this as we start turning. I'll show you how I use this one. And then to make this jig, I made another jig. So this jig here was to actually cut this circle here. I said I got a lathe. Now I could cut that circle with a bandsaw or whatever, but it's like, well, if I got a lathe, I may as well cut a circle on the lathe. So I made this jig here so that I could take the pieces, and that was, inside here is where that would go. So then I take that and turn the 2 of these at the same time. I cut them in half, put them in there, and then I turn these 2 pieces, and then I make my jig out of here. I got thinking about this particular jig. I mean, I used it, and it's safe, but after I looked at it, it's probably not something you would necessarily want to do. I got the bill tap to where I made it so it go on my lathe. But if you were to get a catch in this may not be the best thing. But I used it, felt pretty safe with it. You guys can have a look at that.
So Gary, you gonna go home and make all this stuff?
Yeah. But you don't have to have all of this to make this project. But just to give you a little bit of idea there, it turned into, it kind of mushroomed into something else here. So let's hold this. I don't know if you guys like handouts or not. Does anybody want instructions for this? I wrote up the instructions and everything. So if you want them afterwards, I can give you the handout. And there's also 50 questions at the end, because I believe something too, you know, for new woodturners, you don't realize what you don't know. And for this particular project, there's 50 questions that I came up with that would really be good if you could actually, you know, answer those questions or just kind of have a you know, an idea of what you're getting into. So I've got those listed out. But, and you know, I've learned several things as I was going through this and learning it. So I'm going to try to share all that with you tonight, the mistakes that I made and the various things that I learned from this. Well, back up 1 second. So like I showed you earlier, what we're going to turn. So we're making this one tonight, you know, same one. This was out of cherry, but this is what we would turn. And, you know, maybe we'll call this the untraditional square bowl. The traditional square bowl, this one here, I cut this one on a table saw or band saw, and I wanted it to be 6 inches. So you cut it exactly 6 inches. And then this is the one that you just mount it just like a regular bowl, and you turn it like a regular bowl, but you're leaving your 6-inch square. So you're starting with a 6-inch square, you're leaving it, and you're simply turning it round. You know, you give it some kind of a form to it, curve, whatever. So, but that's, you know, that's the difference. This is what we're doing tonight, and then this would kind of be the traditional one. You guys can take a look at those two, just comparing the difference there. All right, so I did talk about the fact of I put a piece of paper in between here. The reason I came up with putting paper in here is you're going to have a bandsaw here tonight. So I couldn't cut it in half. So I needed a way in these presentations that I could split this in half. So when we get to that point, we're going to split this. So that piece of paper that's in between, that's actually going to split. And I'll pass this around too. You can see where that piece of paper is actually going to split, and you can separate that. And you've probably possibly made things like that, or of course you've seen something on YouTube like that where somebody has used paper. Inside-outside turning is one of the ones that you do paper. But this allows you to split this and gives us the opportunity not to have a bandsaw here, you know, for this purpose. So pass this around. You know, people sometimes just don't realize you can take a piece of paper and split it in half. But that's what that'll look like. Something else for glue up, you know, I like to share my mistakes with you so you don't make my mistakes. And sometimes I don't make the smartest decisions. So this one here is one that I was turning on the lathe and it came apart on me. Luckily, it kind of went to the back and fell down. But this one came apart. And it's like, well, why did it come apart? It's like, well, I tried to outsmart myself. And I thought, well, maybe I don't need to glue the full 36 square inches of glue. So I didn't put glue in the center. I just put glue more on the outside. And I also used a different type of paper. So that's some combination there, not gluing completely, or the piece of paper that I used was possibly the problem. So this one here came apart. So if you're going to use this method of putting paper in there, make sure you use paper. One of the demos I was given, you know, I've used copy paper, white paper, whatever, but there was a paper expert at one demo. So he informed me that white paper is bad because of the short fibers in it compared to a brown paper bag, which has longer fibers. So now I'm switching over to the brown paper bags instead. So, but here's an example of make sure that you use all your glue. Don't spare on the glue. Glue it up. Make sure it's going to stay together the whole time. Or make sure you have a nice safety shield here between us and you. So this one came apart. You got like everything passed around, but that one there. So, all right, that's a lot of the stuff that I learned, I believe. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let's turn this. So I do like to keep sharing things that I learned too. And if you buy a ruler, take and check it to see if it's actually accurate. Because these two here, I only paid $1 each, so you can't complain too much about what you get for $1. But these two rulers within 10 inches, this one's off 1/8 of an inch. I was in the shop working and something wasn't adding up, so I finally realized what it was. So this one's off 1/8 of an inch, so we don't use this one anymore. But
I didn't know that was the one that was off the 1/8 of an inch instead of the other one.
I compared it to an actual tape measure. Yeah, I checked it. Okay, so we're gonna turn this. We're gonna turn it round on 2 different axes, and then we're actually gonna go to a 3rd axis. To get turning this, and the glue up here too, I glued this up so that we have standard spindle grain if we're turning it one way, and then the other way it'd be more like turning a bowl. So I like to start by turning the end grain first. So in order to do this, this is where our waste board comes into play here. So I go ahead and get the waste board here. I'm at 6.5. So I'm going to do. There questions or anything? Sorry.
What was the question? Somebody asked something.
We're 6.5, and then we split here. So then we go 3/4. So we're at our 3/8. And then of course, same on the other side. Sure I did that right. 3 1/4 right. And get our 3/8. So we get our 2 center points there. And we'll go ahead and get this thing mounted up and start making a little mess here. All right, for this, we're just, starting between centers. Any questions at this point?
So was that about a 2-week course on how to make the jigs?
Yeah, I did. Maybe I got carried away on making jigs, but it just makes life a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, the first time I seen it, I thought he really likes to make gigs.
Yeah.
Do you sell the jigs?
No, I hadn't did that or don't have a patent on them either, so.
Because I don't want to make them.
That's true. Probably the jigs would. I should probably really say you don't have to have the jigs, but. All right, so. Then something about this, at home you could go ahead and go to the bandsaw and cut off these corners too. So you wouldn't have to turn these corners, you could cut them off. But I kind of consider it practice. You got that wood there, and if you want to practice, because you're going to have to make this straight line. That edge of that bowl is your cut. So you're going to have to do that. A little light here. And to get this parallel and everything, you want to line your tool rest up with your bed because you're having to cut that straight line. So I'm looking down at the bed here and lining up my tool rest so I know that this is straight or parallel with the bed. And then my cut, I'm going to keep it parallel too. And of course we're going to come through here, so. We'll start off a little bit slower since this thing's a big block of wood here. Much nice. All right, so we'll stop a few times there and just check. Got a long ways to go here. What you're watching, you want to make sure you're cutting this straight. And I can already see, I've got to go back and clean up something there. But for one thing, you'd be checking to make sure you're straight here. And then you're also going to eye your cut down at the bed and make sure it's still parallel with the bed. So, we'll be watching that every time here. And we'll take several cuts to, get us there where we want to go. Just keep making adjustments, watching it, making adjustments. This one's a practice cut. Now you've got the wood and you haven't turned several hundred of these, you may as well practice. And while you're practicing turning right-handed, Steve pointed this out, is you should also be turning left-handed. You get twice as much use out of your sharpening, so you may as well practice too. And learn to turn left-handed. You never know when that's going to come in handy. And it does feel a little bit different left-handed, but it's just practice to increase the feel. You see, I made that just a little wavy for you so you could see that. Then when you check it, you can see that you're not perfect, but you still have time to clean that up. So keep an eye on it. But as you get going, you can pick up speed a little bit, and you should also move your rest in as you take away some of the wood. It's just a matter of, you didn't take this off in the day install, and you just keep going here. And just keep watching that line. I'm particularly using that, but you don't want to necessarily rush this. And you don't want to overshoot. If you're shooting for that 6 inch, you gotta keep an eye where you are with it. I didn't pass around two of the other ones I did. This was a 5 inch, and we'll say it's a 4 inch, but actually more like 3 3/4 because I wasn't paying attention. So that one, ended up a little bit smaller. So, once again, just keep checking. I can see that wouldn't make a very nice straight edge on the bowl at this point. It's a little bit wavy. And then also keep checking, keep looking down at the bed and see if you're running parallel with the bed or whether you need to make adjustments. So at this point, we're not too bad off, so let's just keep going. Just a matter of just watching it and getting that practice in and staying steady across there. And trying to think of yourself as the bandsaw or the table saw, you need to cut straight across. And I can see, I think I just kind of went from good to a little worse here. But, same thing. Make adjustments before we still have about a half an inch to go. But you can keep watching and making your adjustments. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself because at the last minute, you'll be run out of wood and then you'll turn this 6 inch into a 5.5 inch square bowl. It's just a matter of looking between down the side here shortly. I think part of the problem for me right now is I forgot to put my glasses on so I can see. You have a little bit of a restraint. Oh, that's much better. Okay. It does help if you can see when you're turning. Anybody ever have that same problem? We likely can increase the speed a little bit. And it's just a good time to really start thinking about, like I said, getting that straight. You don't want to have to do a lot of sanding. So if you can, the better cut you can make here, the less sanding you'll have to do. You won't have to start with 60 grit paper to take these grooves out. And I do stop several times just to see where we're at. Just getting close to the waste board, so we're about at the 6.5 inch, but we'll, be closing in on it shortly. Let's go ahead and move back up a little bit, still staying parallel. Just a little bit lower. Get it up. All right, so this is when we used the jig. And that's the reason I made this jig, was to drop this on here so you can know when you're at the 6 inches. Which, look at that, I probably should have checked that a little bit sooner. Because we're already dropping there, we're not dropping on this side. So if I look through here right now, this side's a little higher, so I need to take off a little bit there, but as you saw, I don't need to take any more off this side right now. So I should have been checking a little bit sooner with that jig. But let's just go ahead and clean this up across here.
And now we know what that jig's for.
Just use it sooner. And that jig actually has multiple purposes. So that was the first one, was to know when you hit your target, and tonight is about showing you how to do this. I won't walk out of here with a perfect turning tonight, but hopefully you leave knowing, how to do this or how not to do it. So there we can see we've hit our target, so we know to stop there. So another thing this jig is good for now is to actually, I've oversized this. I'm targeting a 6 inch square bowl. My blank is 6.5. Sometimes your edges won't be perfect or something, but now I have that extra 1/4 inch on both sides to adjust. But now this jig allows me to come in here and I can mark, I can decide, I can look at the side of the turning here and decide, okay, this is going to be the outside and this will be the outside. So now that tells me that that's going to be the 6 inches across there. I think maybe it's about 6 1/8, but that now gives me something that I can measure between those two lines. Yep, 6 1/8, so 3 1/16. So now this gives me my center point for my next turning. So this is the point here where I would go ahead and mark that all the way around. So now that's giving me my center point on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and split that and mark it and get my center points here, because when we turn that, that'll give me, you know, the next mounting. So it's my 3/8 there. Any questions? The usual question here is, do you have to have a wasteboard? Because people look at this and they say, well, why do you have the wasteboard? So, you know, we had that conversation at the last demo, and you wouldn't have to have the wasteboard. But as you can see, the wasteboard makes it easy that I mount, you know, with the wasteboard. So it's going to damage that particular piece of wood anyway. So that may as well be wasteboard instead of the actual wood that I'm using. It also gives me that reference that I know that this is 90 degrees to the other one. If you didn't have the wasteboard, then you're going to have to try to figure that out, or use your indexing to get a point here and then index it 180 degrees the other way. So there's pros and cons to both ways, but you know, the one that I watched, he did the wasteboard, so I've did the wasteboard. But if you want to go home and do it slightly different, you know, that's the thrill of turning. You can do whatever you need to.
Is there any math involved in the determining the width of your waste block versus the width of the other pieces?
No, the only math was deciding, you know, that you want the 6-inch square, and then what side, you know, how deep you want this. But you know, you're going to end up with a 6-inch circle. So
back to the depth that you're going up with again.
yes, yeah. So that gives us our mark here. Now, part of this process, you know, I'm going to go ahead and make sure we mark this well, because we're going to be, flipping it here on this one. But now, in the process here, you would go ahead and sand all of this. You'd sand it all down, because you're only going to have it spinning like this, you know, on this axis at this point. So you would sand it. And the one I passed around that came apart, you know, gluing, you do your sanding, you do whatever finishing you want, if you want to do it while it's under, you know, power here. Now we're going to turn this thing 90 degrees to get us to the next one. Now, with this, here's what we're targeting. This is one, I'll pass this one around. So this is what we're targeting. So we started here, we turned it this way, and that gave us this outside. We're going to turn it 90 degrees this way to give us the other outside. But then I want to turn it 90 degrees this way so that I can mount it between centers again and put the tenons on the outside here. Now, the original video that I watched, he didn't put tenons on the outside. He got it to this point here with no tenons. He took it to the bandsaw, he cut it in half. And when he cut it in half, he then put it on a worm screw. He took and marked, you know, from corner to corner. He drilled a hole on the inside of this, and then he put it on the worm screw. Then he came back and turned this tenon. So that was kind of like an extra step. Plus, for me, if you didn't get that worm screw in exactly the right spot, then your center bowl is going to be shifted over possibly one way or the other. So I thought that this method would be better to get this, because you can pretty well, we're going to try to guarantee where this center is. And then if you can get these 2 points lined up, then you make your tenon. Then when you mount it in the chuck on this tenon, then when you turn your inside bowl, then it should have the same reveals all the way around. So that was the theory that I went with. But here's another one to pass around. And that's the same wood I'm turning tonight too. I had a lot of this maple, I believe is what it was. But this kind of gave me a problem when I, trying to figure out how to mark that center. Because what I did at one point, we'll use this one here. And we'll kind of just mock this up here. But before I came up with the method I'm going to show you, I would get to this point here and I would have those edges. So I would take a piece of tape, because I needed to know that center point. So I would take a piece of tape and run it on those ridges this way, and I would run a piece of tape on those ridges this way to come up with that center point. And that kind of worked, but it didn't feel like it was giving me the best absolute center from what I thought I could get to. So I tried that method, and then that wasn't exactly, I just kept thinking there had to be a better way. So I went back to my jig and I says, well, if I've got this and I want to know that center point, when I drop my jig on here, why don't I put a hole in the center here and go through, and I could, set this on here and then I could just mark that center point. I tried that and that didn't exactly give me what I wanted either. So that was the second attempt. When I finally settled on is, I had this on the lathe and I went up and had lunch and I came back down and I was just thinking about it. It's like, I need to know, because if that line's going to disappear right now, I can see that line. And when I did the other way, I could have a line. But I'm going to lose that line in the sanding process and finishing. That line's not going to be there. So what I came up with is, why don't we cut that line into the bowl here? So while we have this at this point, we just go ahead, and I don't always get this right exactly where I want it, but we go ahead and cut a curve here. And by doing this, that's going to survive the sanding and the finishing. And then I'm going to have this mark that I can use for that crosshair. And I believe that gets me to the closest way of really knowing that true center. So we do that on both sides. Any questions? Nobody's saying, well, you're cutting a line in your bowl, aren't you going to see that at some point? But if you look at where I'm cutting here, eventually that's going to be turned this way on the sides, and where that cut is actually where I'm going to make the tenon. And then eventually I'll take the tenon away. So, so cutting this here is just so that I know where to put my center points later. So do that. So now we have that. At this point, we would do sanding. The best sanding that I've, come up with was made the good old Carpenter sanding blocks. I've got the different grits. I bought a 3-watt laser. Spent some more time. You wouldn't call this a jig, but I made a pattern so I could take and do that. So then, you're just sanding this. Keep your fingers off of the edges here. That's why I get a little bit longer here, but, just sand back and forth. This one isn't so bad. When you sand the next one, it's a little more like sanding air. I'll show you that a little bit later, but we're not going to do any sanding. But that's what this is, make yourself a set of sanding blocks. One more thing to make. Question? All right, so I think we're at the point, sand it, finish it, whatever you want to do here. We got our lines cut, so now we can go ahead and turn this.
You gonna make one of these tomorrow? Basically. Not tomorrow.
I got an urn.
When you get ready to do it, I wanna come over because I need some help.
I got instructions.
I'll need them.
I did hear the bad statistic that, people give demos and only less than 2% of people actually make what they see. It's
That's why I asked Gary first.
okay.
Gary,
I'll have one made better more.
He's going to drive home tonight.
Gary typically does make whatever somebody
Cool.
does in a demo.
We'll be looking for pictures. Maybe not this one.
Leave everything deals. No, really?
All right, so we're going to do the same thing here. This will go a little bit quicker because we got less to take off here.
This might be one that people would actually watch the video on, but I think we need another video on how to make the jigs.
All right, so let's give this a shot. And for this one, you're not starting on the outside at this point. You're starting more in the center here of the crown. Same exact thing. Make sure we have everything lined up. And just keep working up, nice and easy. And back to that same practice, throw in a couple of left-handed cuts for good measure. And continue to check to see if you're cutting straight, because you want to make sure that you actually have a square bowl when you get finished. And I can tell that I'm a little bit off there as far as if it's not lining up with the bed at this point. So it's a good time to go ahead and see if I can get that lined up. And just make sure you don't overshoot it. So once again, back to the jig. I don't think we're there yet, but you can tell from the one side. But this is where, you start checking. And continuing to see if you're staying straight at 12 and parallel with the bed. Just try to make one of the fine adjustments at this point. We're just not quite there because we can still see the check to see where you are. How many more cuts? 2 or 3? Let's try 2. Alright. Oh, okay, still not. Ooh, it's not a scratch, is it? All right, one more. If you believe it's the final cut across there, the only thing that'll make it better is the sandpaper, but you'd rather not have to use that much sanding. All right. So let's call that one. Yeah, one more.
One more.
Gotta have one more cut.
One more, just get one more.
Make sure it matches the other side. Okay. So then back for this one now. Yep, and I made the mistake I did sometimes is this one, actually that'll work for me. Still have my center here, so this would be, that should be the center of this side. And if we look, yep, that's center. On the other side, I actually turned it away. So this one I didn't go deep enough, but since we have one, then I can come back over here and get that center point. And now that we have the center, we can come back in here and cut the kerf again. And then this way, I know exactly, or as close as possible, where that point is. So you've got that cut both ways, and then same here. So I believe I haven't come up with anything different than doing it this way. If anybody has thoughts on it another way, let me know. But that'll give us the center points here to use when we flip this thing one more time. So it's 2 times between center already, then we're going to go for the 3rd time between center. But of course, at this point here, once again, you be doing your sanding, your finishing, because it's the last time it's going to be turning this direction. So that gives you your curve on, the 2 sides that you see curved. That gives you that. So you're actually you're manufacturing or producing 2 bowls here at this point. So it's all of this work to get 2 blanks, and then eventually we're going to split this, and then you'll work individual bowls from that point forward. But now we have it at this point. So here we go ahead and take it out. And this is where, if you had a bandsaw, you could cut this in half. If you don't have a bandsaw, the best choice is go get your wife's best knife. She won't know what you did with it, and you can always return it. But, get the best knife out there. I think I'm going to have to, you're not going to see this on the camera so much.
I don't think I can get a camera on that.
Yeah, so I don't want to do it on your leg.
The top one. See it down
Oh.
there. You see it this good?
And actually, I better not split it just yet, because I didn't.
They're right. You can't see it.
Should go put 10 on.
Yeah, I'm going to put a 10 in first. But you guys were trying to let me get ahead of myself.
See what happened with that last cut? Yes.
All right, what was that?
See what happened with that last cut? You got to do with it.
Yep. So now we're going to get it between centers here. And this is where we're going to put a tenon, and we'll just do 1 tenon on one side. I think you guys will get the idea. And I know that my jaw is a 50 millimeter, and to get that, to get the right size tenon, I can take my carpenter's pencil and stand it up on the edge. And that more or less is where I need to create my tenon.
Are you doing this with wet wood, or do you have them dry in these big flames?
These are all dry. These are about 4 years dry. So I haven't tried anything wet to see what it would do, but yeah, these are about 4 years just dry, air dry. So for this now, we'll just make our tenon. That's a little bumpy there for the visual. Not going to get too close on that. Switch over to a spindle down. Just come in and do a little better job than that. And mine's a dovetail, so that'll give us enough there to to get that on the chuck. So now we can take this and split it in half. Just got to figure out where I put the piece of paper so I know where to split it, but
For the other one.
I could, yeah. You could actually do the same thing. You could either turn it over there or flip it around and go ahead and do the 10 and 2. Just to save time, I won't do the second one, but yeah, that's exactly what you would do. You'd do a second tenon. Let's go ahead and split this in half now. So once again, your best knife you've got. And since I want to use this side and not have to cut extra away, just go ahead and now your wife won't notice the little ding marks in the knife.
I'm just trying to improve it, because
Yep.
I'm busy, just make sure you get legal life insurance.
you're nuts.
That splits that way so you don't have to have a bandsaw.
What kind of wood are you using for your waste wood for it?
Just so this pine, this was pine laying around. And that is something, one more tip that I forgot to mention earlier. When you make your wasteboard, make sure this one here had varnish on it. And this one I actually turned probably that 4 or 5 inch on there. But you can tell, you can't even tell this had glue on it because that varnish didn't allow the glue to get into this wood. So probably the only reason it stayed together was there was a couple of holes here from previous screws or something. So that possibly held it together. So if you've got varnish or something, don't leave it on there. Go back to bare wood so that the glue will stick to the wood, it will stick to the paper, and everything will stay together. So yeah, this was an eye-opener that just peeled right off of here. So it didn't come off with a lathe only, but just realizing that wasn't such a good thing. So, but now we're at the point that you would have 2 of these. So all of that to get to your 2 blanks. But now you've got your 2 blanks, and now you turn these just like a regular bowl. And by doing all of these demos, you know, I've got a lot of these that I don't have sanded or anything. So it's like, well, what could you do with those now? Because I really don't want to go back and sand this by hand or anything. So something you could do with that is if you have a power tool, power carver, is you can carve some detail in. I recently took a class with Sammy Long, and he kind of showed us this. So you could do something like this with a piece like this that you don't want to go back and sand or something. So I'll pass that around. I just did 2 sides, kind of getting an idea of what I could do with it. But this would give you, you know, some way that, hey, I've got a few of these blanks now laying around that I need to do something with. Now we'll get set up to turn it just like a regular bowl. But you guys all know how to do this, I imagine. Not self-ejecting. Oh. Uh-oh. Yeah, it is. So it does self-eject.
Spring.
I don't think it has a spring.
You don't have a spring, just, you got the pin, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, yeah, that's all.
Luckily,
I keep a magnet on my lathe, got that big ring.
so you can catch, go looking for them. I can tell you're a wise man. All right, so this is standard here. So
It's not a matter if, but please, really, it's a matter if,
yeah,
because it's gonna hit the ground.
Well, as clean as you keep your shop, I'm surprised you have to use a
Oh, yeah,
bag
they
this
do.
big.
I'm just sitting on the floor.
It's the only thing in the floor, right?
Yeah. Do something like nice. It protects the tools when you drop them on the floor, you don't hit the nails, that's it.
So for this, we'll
Did
just
you
keep,
do this by hand with, in a drill or what?
yeah, power carver. Yeah, a little power carver. Just sit there and draw a little pattern on it, whatever pattern you want, and then just sit back and keep the outside lines so that you keep the form of the bowl. And just go down and, you know, do something like that. You could do whatever design you want. I mean, it's just,
Round burr.
yeah, that's a round burr, takes out the,
Round burr on the power car.
and then a smaller burr to go back and kind of draw lines if you want lines coming out of the bottom of it. I just
I like that.
haven't sat back down and did that, but yeah, I've got,
I like that better than sanding.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Right.
Well, maybe just a few minutes.
All right, questions? All right, let's get back and just turn this now. So we'll just clean up this and then make a decision, but let's clean up the surface first. And of course you want to stay clear of this now because you got those edges coming around those square corners and they would put a hurting on you. And we'll just sneak in here, kind of watch for the shadow. And this is one thing, if you're making two of these, one thing you can challenge yourself, of course, is to make two exactly the same. But if you're doing that, you know, you're going to have to pay attention now to how much are you taking off this surface and how much are you eventually going to take off the back surface. And the second one that you do, you're going to need to kind of do the same thing if you were matching these and wanted a matched pair of them, or you were in some kind of a contest or something. If you're just turning them and you're giving them away, you know, no big deal. But if you were, you know, really wanting to make a matched set, then you'd really have to start paying attention to just how much you're taking off here. So let's go ahead and clean that up just a little bit, but let me give myself, you know, let's pick our, maybe what we want our reveal to be, and let's see if we're close to center here. And maybe we say that's going to be our reveal. Well, where I'm standing, it looks pretty good. So now let's just go ahead and clean this up. And take out the bowl. But I've seen in show and tell tonight, I tell you guys how to do this part, so. Sorry? Yeah, that's about 1,000. Probably go a little bit higher there now. Get that out of the way. And just deciding what you want that inside to be. Nice curve. Of course, we're not close yet, but use a built-in measuring tape to see where you are. Got a little further to go. I can go back and clean up the surface a little bit there. So you can just kind of slip in, rub it a little bit, get to the outside. Get back in. Just clean that surface up, and of course you'd be sanding at home. Clean up your surface and then continue on the bulb. For Tim's highlights in the video, I'll try not to make a funnel here. That makes some good highlights, right?
Good to see you using a nice sharp bowl gouge too.
Yeah, absolutely. I sharpen this before every demo. I show up with a sharp one.
You can tell it.
Let's do one more cut. And that's probably deep enough for this one. Yep. So we do that, and of course you could go back and use a scraper or whatever and make that as smooth as you want it, and of course sanding. We won't go through all that tonight for this one.
It doesn't look like it needs any scraping from here.
We could use just a little bit, but a little waving. But that gets you to this point, and when I was a new turner, it's like I get to this point, then I didn't really, it's like, okay, how do you take that foot off? So I think Tim taught me this in a class, and it works pretty well for this. We may need something slightly different, but it works really well for any bowl. I mean, I use this all the time. I wanted to buy a vacuum chuck, and I've got all the pieces, but I haven't really started using it. But the method that I use here is to go back in.
3/8" closed cell phone.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's a piece I got from your class.
Yep.
And speaking of that class that Tim did, this is what I made in Tim's class. Now, I didn't follow his instructions, so I kind of ended up with something that looks slightly different than maybe what it should. It wasn't supposed to, I think we started with a thicker piece of wood than we needed. But I didn't quite listen. I didn't get the points.
We started with a piece this thick, and we put a line on it and told everybody, do not go past this line. And then they all set them up in their lays, and I said, do not go past this line. And 3 people in the class
Went past.
got carried away, and they turned it like it's turning a bowl, and they just cut from the bottom all the way up to the top. Went past the line.
Overachievers.
But that's when you turn it over and it makes lampstand. Yep. So that was another square bowl.
But I like it turned upside down like that. I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah, for the lamp.
Yeah,
Yeah, it works.
I
So
like it.
you got to make something to go on top of it.
But he turned another one right after that and done a beautiful job.
Now this here, you know, you want to put this here, and you just somebody, you know, I always called this jam chuck. Somebody else said pressure, but it's, you know, you're basically jamming this up against it. Now this is where you can really, this is where you may not end up with a square bottom. Because if you get this in here, and if it's not exactly, I mean, putting it there with the foam, if you don't get this exact, then your bottom may not be exact. So exactly. So you may want to, for this particular square bowl, it's probably better to have the other mount, or maybe I could make another jig where you could put this on the jig and do it that way. But yeah, I don't have luck with those, and with this curve on the outside, if you had the right grippers, it would be better. So to kind of square this up, I would give myself a point here and check those corners as they come around. And that looks like it would be pretty good. So then you tighten it up. And how tight do you tighten this?
Just before it cracks.
Exactly. You guys heard that already.
If you hear the crack, then back off just a little.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's what you do.
We had the same thing.
And then tighten a little bit more. And then now it's a matter of just taking this tenon off. Making sure everything's clear. Come back in and apply your pressure towards the headstock as much as possible. And maybe don't use so much speed. But just come in here and take it out, clean up the bottom. And you could start watching for, you know, whether you're square or not. And you could measure it to see, and maybe you make any adjustments here that you needed to get that square. But, you know, sanding, scraping, whatever it takes to get that nice finish on there. Like I said, tonight we're not going for the perfect turning here. Just really want you guys to give you the opportunity of seeing something that you may want to try. I hope somebody wants to go home and make a few dozen of these. I know there's probably another several hundred clubs out there who would love to see it. And then of course you want to take off as much as you dare here. Double gouge just so we can get in there a little bit closer. Turn it on to make sure you're clear. And take off. But you don't have to go kamikaze on it, especially for a demo. I don't need it to fly off here. So take it back out. You can just knock it off. So that's how you do one of these. And of course the second would be the same. But that's turning a square bowl with this style. So hopefully you got something out of this. But that's it. That's the demo.
Good job.
Thanks, everyone. And if you do want the printed instructions, I do have those available if you want them. So, questions, anybody? Yeah, I got you out of here before 10 o'clock, right? Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Very much.